Your Business Podcast with Frank Furness.
Well, hi everybody and welcome to Sales School, and this is Frank Furness, where we're going to help you make more money by mastering sales, dominating marketing, and really being happy. In our next episodes, we're going to be taking a look at the psychology of sales, and I'm going to be joined by my really good friend Ian Halsall, where we speak about Neuro-Linguistic Programming. We're really into the advanced stuff now, and once you start using this stuff, you'll be absolutely amazed at what it does to your sales. So Ian, let's now talk about language patterns. What are language patterns? I've heard about these things. How do they actually affect us, and how do they help us in sales?
Language patterns are sentence structures that are unusually persuasive. That's a good definition. They enable you to say whatever it is you want to say, but package it in a more persuasive way that will get people to buy in more of the time. I've got to give you a little bit of history by way of explaining them. The original roots of NLP were a couple of Americans in California, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, one of whom I've trained with, by the way, and they studied people who were particularly effective. One subject that we've not touched on really on this program that's part of NLP is modelling. The idea of if you want to get a great result, find somebody who's already getting that result and do what they do. And if NLP is about one thing, you could say it's about modelling, because John and Richard modelled in the early days of NLP Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, but most important of all, a gentleman called Milton Erickson.
In fact, let's just touch on that quickly. Would modeling, if I'm in sales, would modeling be finding somebody that's really successful and looking at some of the things that person does to be successful and then adapting some of those habits?
You wouldn't believe the number of people that don't do this obvious step. I'll give you an example. With my work in breakfast networking and setting up networking clubs, the first thing I did was I asked around and I said, who are the best? And I came up with 3 names, one of which I'd already got to make friends with, and I got 2 more names. So, and everybody I said, by the way, these 3 people are the best in the business. 1 lady and 2 gentlemen. So I just made a mission of going to find them. And I said, can I block some time with you? And they were very busy. I said, well, we're kind of busy. We can only meet you at 6:30 in the morning. And I said, no problem. And I said, okay, so how do you do it? What do you do? How do you prospect? How do you close? What kind of things do you say? Where do you go to network? And guess what? They told me. This is an interesting thing. Now, for some reason, and this is probably worth taking a couple of minutes right now to talk about, for some reason, very few people want to model. And there is a gender difference here. Men are more reluctant to do it than women are. Something about how we're brought up. Men are the guys who, they like in the karaoke bar to sing Frank Sinatra singing My Way, I Did It My Way. Well, that's okay much of the time, but there can be many occasions where finding somebody else has done it, the old phrase, don't reinvent the wheel. And so in the early days of NLP, it was mostly modelling.
In fact, if I could just say something there, Ian, if anybody wants to find out about great salespeople and model themselves on great salespeople, I decided about 4 years ago to find out what makes the top salespeople tick. What do they actually do? What are the techniques they use? And I wrote to 500 of the world's top salespeople. They sent me back all of the information. I analyzed that, and that all can be now found in my triple CD series, Walking with Tigers, the success secrets of the world's top salespeople. If you want to find out a bit more about that, maybe go to my website, the product section, have a look at Walking with Tigers, or drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com, because that's all about modeling. There's 500 of the world's top salespeople. Why reinvent the wheel? Find out some of the things that they do, and then just start trying to do those same things yourself.
And you know what? It can save a lot of time. If somebody spent 20 years figuring something out, you don't have to spend 20 years. You can spend an afternoon, and NLP gives you the tools to unpackage what people do. How do they talk? How do they think? What's their language? That's very important. What are their values? What are their beliefs? And with NLP tools, you can unravel what people give you. Because here's the thing, a lot of people who are effective, they don't always consciously know what makes them effective, and that's why NLP can be useful. So, back to Milton Erickson. When Milton Erickson was being modelled, it was found that he had what has become known as a list of 19 different language structures called language patterns, which were unusually persuasive in getting people to change their minds. Now, we might not be able to cover all 19. I think there's about 10 hours worth of training on just language patterns, so we'll give you a few. I'll kick off by using 4, which are easy to use. They sound a bit technical. For those of you who want to learn the proper NLP definitions, they're going to be cause and effect, complex equivalence, loss performative, and conversational postulate. Now, I'll go through these one at a time, and I'll give you examples of how to use them. The first I'll talk about is complex equivalence. Complex equivalence is where something is implied to mean the same as something else. And the way that you'll use that is to use the phrase, and that means. So, for example, you might be explaining a certain feature of your product, like improved speed, response time, it weighs this, it's got that price, and you say the words, and that means. And then whatever comes next, it saves you money. It's a particularly persuasive structure. The next one is cause and effect. Now, this is much more psychological in the way that it operates on the person listening to you. It presupposes that they don't have a lot of choice in their response. Okay? So if you say to them, now that you've heard what I've got to say, you really have to buy this. Now logically, that doesn't make sense because they don't have to, but using the term you have to implies they don't have choice. Another one is loss performative. Loss performative is where you're not making reference to something that you're claiming. For example, many people have found that. That's a good loss performative phrase. Another one is, this is one of our most popular products. Now, you're not actually saying anything. All you're doing is implying something. You're not saying why. You're not even mentioning somebody by name, but you're implying that somebody, but you're not saying who, finds it valuable. Now, this works because one of the reasons that people do what they do is because they believe other people are doing it. The tendency to follow the herd and buy what other people are buying. And for those of you who are selling in Asia, this is even more important, because my Asian friends, particularly when I'm in Malaysia, where I spend most of my time, people say, do you want to know how we choose a restaurant? Well, we walk down the street, we see several restaurants, and the one that's got the most people in is the one that we go to.
And I come from South Africa, and it's very similar there.
All right. And it's a very powerful thing. So a language pattern that's loss performative is just taking advantage of that. And here's the good news. You don't actually have to say anything. If you say something like, this is very popular, the worst that can happen is somebody can say to you, well, can you give me their names? And you'll say, well, no, it's not always appropriate to share precise information. That, some people can be a little bit delicate, but frankly, it's very, very rare anyway. Conversational postulate is a way of giving a command without it sounding like a command. So I gave a clue of this earlier when I talked about TM Cran, and I said, now I'm not saying that you want to buy now. That is a sentence with a sentence in it. The big sentence is, I'm not saying you want to buy now, but there's a sentence in it that says, you want to buy now. So that's a conversational postulate, and you can use them all the time because consciously you're not actually committing yourself. In fact, in the example I just gave, you actually said, I'm not saying. So I'm not saying is a great structure, by the way, if you want a ready-made structure. I'm not saying this is the best product in the world, and I'm not saying you're going to buy it now. I'm not even saying that I'm the best trainer that you've ever heard. Do you notice how that all works? So, and consciously people are going, well, that's okay. He's not saying anything inflammatory or or making any particular claim. But the suggestions and the presuppositions that are inherent in the claim do get accepted. I'm wondering is another one. I'm wondering what kind of things are going to make you want to buy this product.
What about something like, I'm curious?
Yep, that's another one. Because what are they going to do? Argue with whether you're curious or not? You see, the beautiful thing about language patterns is it's a little bit like, somebody's trying to punch fog. Logically, they can't argue with you. All they can do is accept the suggestions that you make, even, and this is even more interesting, even if they want to argue with you.
Would you be able to use this to soften hard questions? So one of the hard questions might be, what is your budget for this product? What if you had to put in some of those there? Mike, I'm wondering what roughly your budget would be for this. Or I'm curious, just to get things into perspective, what kind of budget do you have?
Conversational postulates like this work very powerfully. Another one would be, I'm assuming that it might be okay for you to give me an indication of the budget. Now, of course, naturally, you might not be able to give me a precise number, but, just stay to within a few dollars or so, and these kind of things. You're not actually directly asking them anything, and so it's not really easy for them to have the resistance that you'd have in a normal buying process. So, yes.
Great. So if we just have to wind that up there, what are one of the two main pointers that we can take away from that, the modeling and reframing?
Well, if we're going to talk about modeling, it's very, very simple. Find someone who's getting a result you want and do what they do. That's easier to say than do, because if you hang around with them and hope for the best, you might pick up stuff. So I need to give you some specific questions. What books do they read? What beliefs do they have? And how do they use their language? What ways do they have of saying things? That's very important. And by the way, just spending time, forget the details for a moment, just spending time with somebody who's successful is a reframe on you. Because I'll tell you, if you're with somebody who's making a lot more money than you, and they're about as educated as you are, and they're about as good looking as you are, and they're making twice the money, that'll do something to your unconscious mind, because at an unconscious level, you'll be going, hey, you could be doing a lot better than this. They're making that amount of money, why aren't you? And in the wonderful world of sales, there's pretty much always somebody who's making some more money than you somewhere. So just ask yourself the question, what is it they're doing and what could you do to be like that? So there you have it, modelling and reframing in one concept.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And remember, if you'd like to book me to speak at your next conference or do some sales training, either in person or via Zoom remotely, please drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com. Also, please take a look at my website, frankfurness.com, and take a look at some of my courses on productivitycenter.com. Remember also to connect with me on all of the social media channels. They're all under Frank Furness, especially LinkedIn, where I'm almost up to 30,000. And every day I have some great new ideas and tips on sales, marketing, speaking, and anything that will make you money. Hey, this is Frank. See you in the next episode.